You're not a doctor. You have no business being here. The words cut through the sterile air of the hospital lobby like a knife. Emily Green flinched, but she stood her ground. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. I know what I'm doing, she said quietly, trying not to let the fear show. I can help her. Dr. Walter Knox, the hospital's leading child psychologist, took a step forward, his broad frame blocking her path. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed her, an 11-year-old girl standing in a place where only professionals belonged. He didn't need to say it. His look alone said, "What are you doing here?" The tension in the room was palpable. Nurses and orderlies who had witnessed the scene all turned their heads, trying to pretend they weren't watching, but Emily felt their eyes like 1,000 needles. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be anything here, but she was. The doors to the children's therapy wing were locked tight. And behind them, Sarah Johnson, a 9-year-old girl who had been trapped in her own mind for years, waited. Emily didn't need to see her. She could already picture the girl, her hollow eyes, her withdrawn body curled in on itself. Sarah had been through multiple therapies. Doctors had tried everything, but nothing had worked. Not yet. Dr. Knox, who had treated Sarah for nearly 2 years, had told her father in an empty, emotionless voice that the girl would never recover. She's too far gone, he had said. But Emily knew better. She wasn't going to let Dr. Knox's apathy decide Sarah's future. Not when she knew, deep down, that there was a way to reach her, if only someone would listen. Please, Emily pressed, her voice trembling but determined, let me try. Dr. Knox laughed, short and cold. He took another step closer, towering over her, his voice dropping to a low growl. You think you know more than me, don't you? You're a child. He spat the words out like they were poison. This is a hospital, not a daycare. We don't let little girls like you play pretend with lives. A wave of frustration surged through Emily, but she held her ground. I'm not pretending. I can help her. Just, give me a chance. A hard silence settled between them. And then, like a wave crashing against a rock, Dr. Knox's face softened, but only briefly. I'm sorry, Emily. But no. His voice was final. He turned, signaling for the security guards. Security. He called out, as though Emily were nothing more than a nuisance. Emily's heart hammered against her chest, her breath coming faster, but she didn't move. She had come this far. She couldn't give up now. Before the guards could reach her, Emily took a step back, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't fight Knox on his terms. He had too much power, too much authority. But she had something he didn't. She had knowledge, and the will to use it. I'll find another way, she whispered to herself, stepping backward. She didn't look back. She couldn't. But one thing was clear, this fight wasn't over. It had just begun. Emily's life wasn't easy. Raised in the gritty streets of Brooklyn, she had learned to fight for every inch of what she believed in. Raised by her mother Clara Green, a renowned child psychologist in her own right, Emily had inherited her mother's gift for understanding the human mind. She had spent hours, days, even months absorbing books and techniques her mother used to heal the broken and the lost. But Emily was different. She wasn't a professional, yet. She wasn't someone a hospital would take seriously. Still, she couldn't stand by and watch Sarah suffer when she knew there was a way to help her. After that meeting with Dr. Knox, Emily knew she had to get closer to Sarah, even if it meant sneaking into the therapy rooms after hours. She couldn't afford to wait for permission. The battle lines had been drawn. Knox would never accept Emily's methods, but Emily knew Sarah's potential better than anyone. And for Emily, nothing in this world was more important than finding the key that would unlock Sarah's world, and prove everyone wrong. Emily didn't waste time thinking about what Dr. Knox had said. There was no point in letting his rejection consume her. Instead, her mind raced with ways to help Sarah. She had to find another way inside the system, another door that might open. That evening, as Emily walked through the bustling streets of Brooklyn, the weight of what had happened started to settle. She passed street vendors, neon signs flashing in every direction, the noise of the city swarming around her. But she was lost in thought. The hum of the world faded as she turned the events of the day over in her mind. She knew she couldn't work within the usual channels, not yet. Knox would never give her a chance. Not in a million years. But there were others, other staff who were disillusioned with the current system, or at least open-minded enough to listen. Her mother, Clara Green, had always told her, the only way to bring about real change is to understand the system and then work around it. With that in mind, Emily set a new plan into motion. She'd gather evidence. She'd find out everything she could about Sarah's treatment, Dr. Knox's methods, and the hospital's protocols. And when the time came, she would strike. The next day, Emily returned to St. Michael's, but this time, she wasn't alone. She'd convinced a trusted nurse, Janet, to give her access to the child psychology unit after hours. Janet had been skeptical at first. Emily was just a kid. How could she possibly help? But something about Emily's determination, something in the way the young girl's eyes burned with a passion far beyond her years, made Janet reconsider. So, Janet quietly led Emily into the back corridors of a unit, her every step slow and deliberate. She handed Emily a binder of notes for Sarah's treatment. The documents were confidential, but Emily's persistence had worked. She would use these to gather all the information she needed to prove Knox wrong. The first few nights were spent going over everything, Sarah's medical history, her previous sessions, the treatments she'd undergone. What jumped out at Emily was the lack of personal engagement in Sarah's therapy. It was cold, clinical, and mechanical. There was no room for creativity, no space for emotion, and no attempt to really connect with Sarah on a human level. It was as if the system had been set up to treat symptoms, not the person. Emily had seen her mother's approach. Clara would never have treated a child like that. But what struck her most was a single note from one of the earlier sessions. It was from a therapist who had worked with Sarah months ago before Dr. Knox took over. The therapist had written, "Sarah reacts to music. Her body responds to certain rhythms. She smiled when I played her favorite song. Maybe worth exploring art/music therapy in future sessions." Emily's eyes widened. Why wasn't this explored more thoroughly? It was a breakthrough, one that could change everything. Days passed, and Emily continued to collect data. She sneaked in more and more observations, taking note of Sarah's reactions, her subtle movements, her expression changes, the way her fingers twitched when music was played near her. Emily began to craft a new treatment plan based on what she knew: art therapy, music therapy, and one-on-one engagement. It wasn't just about fixing Sarah's problems, it was about connecting with her in a way that made her feel seen, heard, and understood. But Emily also knew that she couldn't keep going under the radar for long. Eventually, someone would notice. And that someone would likely be Dr. Knox. He had connections, power, and his pride wouldn't let him admit to any failure. The stakes were high. Emily had to decide, would she continue to work in secret or expose her findings? As Emily debated her next move, things in the hospital began to shift. Dr. Knox grew suspicious of the subtle improvements Emily was making with Sarah. He didn't know how, but he could sense that something was different. He was certain Emily had no business being in the therapy room, yet patients like Sarah were showing signs of progress they hadn't had before. That's when it happened. Emily's breakthrough came when she was able to get Sarah to speak. Just a single word, but it was enough. Sarah had been nonverbal for years, but that night, with Emily's encouragement, she muttered a quiet, "music." The breakthrough Emily had been hoping for finally materialized, and she recorded the moment. The smile that stretched across Sarah's face as she recognized the significance of the moment was proof enough. Emily couldn't ignore what she'd uncovered. But she knew that revealing this to Dr. Knox could be a disaster. If she made the wrong move, all her hard work could be erased. But then, the twist. As Emily was preparing to go public with her findings, she received a call from Janet, the nurse who had helped her. Janet had uncovered something that no one in the hospital had seen before. Dr. Knox had been hiding critical patient reports, some of them related to Sarah's treatment. In fact, some of these reports had shown positive signs of improvement with other children that Knox had neglected. The proof of his incompetence and intentional neglect was staring Emily in the face. This wasn't just a matter of a failed treatment, it was malpractice. It was much bigger than just Sarah. With newfound determination, Emily knew what had to be done. Armed with her findings, she called for a meeting with Dr. Knox. This time, it wasn't a quiet confrontation. Emily had made her case. She wasn't going to back down. She had evidence of his mistakes, the withheld reports, and Sarah's transformation under her care. This wasn't about winning a battle, it was about making sure Sarah and other children got the care they deserved. As Emily stood before Dr. Knox and the hospital administrators, she laid it all out. She explained how Sarah responded to music, how her approach was different, and how Dr. Knox had refused to see what was right in front of him. The room grew silent. Emily could hear her heart beating in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She knew the stakes. This was the moment of truth. Dr. Knox's face turned red. He tried to dismiss Emily, but the evidence was irrefutable. The hospital staff who had once ignored Emily now stood behind her. One by one, they began to speak up, offering their own accounts of Sarah's improvement and the evidence they had seen of Knox's negligence. The fallout was immediate. Dr. Knox was stripped of his position. The hospital initiated an investigation into his practices, and the truth about his failure to properly treat patients, including Sarah, was revealed to the public. His career, built on arrogance and pride, crumbled. Emily, on the other hand, was the hero of the hour. The hospital leadership took note of her work and her tenacity. But the victory didn't come without a price. Emily had risked everything, and though she had proven her methods, she was now on a path where there was no turning back. Her mother's legacy, the lessons Clara Green had taught her, had led to this moment. The world was watching. The following weeks were a whirlwind for Emily. The hospital's leadership had taken her findings seriously, launching an investigation into Dr. Knox's actions, and Emily became the center of a media storm. Interviews, phone calls, and hospital board meetings filled her days. The fame, however, wasn't what kept Emily up at night. It was the pressure, the weight of responsibility that now rested on her shoulders. Dr. Knox's fall from grace was swift. A man who had once been held in high regard by his colleagues was now facing public scrutiny, a ruined reputation, and the real possibility of criminal charges. The media painted him as a villain, and for Emily, it felt strange to see the man she had once feared as a mentor now fall so hard. But she couldn't feel sorry for him. Not when she thought of Sarah. The truth was, Dr. Knox wasn't the only problem. His mindset was part of a system that put reputation over the well-being of children like Sarah. The real question was, how could Emily change that system? Emily wasn't content with the immediate fallout. She couldn't stop at just exposing Dr. Knox. What about the dozens of other children who had suffered from the same neglect? What about the hospitals, the therapists, and the systems that allowed malpractice to thrive? She couldn't do it alone. With the hospital on the verge of changing its policies on child psychology treatment, Emily found herself at the head of a new initiative, the Child Behavioral Revolution. She wasn't just an advisor now. She had a seat at the table. Clara Green's daughter had not only fought for one child, she was now fighting for every child whose potential had been stifled by the old guard. Her first big task was to speak to the hospital staff. The therapy wing needed a major overhaul. They needed more open-minded professionals, people who understood that traditional methods weren't always the best solutions. Emily's vision for the future was clear. It wasn't just about art or music therapy, it was about integrating holistic approaches that valued the child as a whole, not just a diagnosis. It was about collaboration, getting teachers, social workers, and family members involved in the healing process. As Emily prepared for her first major meeting with the hospital board, she could already feel the weight of what was ahead. She was still just a kid, after all. No matter what she had accomplished, there were moments when doubt crept in. Could she really reshape the system? Could one person make a difference? But when she thought of Sarah, her shy, broken, beautiful smile when she started speaking again, she knew the answer. Yes. She could. Not everyone was on Emily's side. As the child behavioral revolution gained momentum, she faced opposition from certain hospital administrators and longtime staff members who felt threatened by change. The old ways had been comfortable for them, and Emily's methods, while promising, seemed untested, even risky. A meeting with Dr. Rebecca Chin, a respected neurologist at St. Michael's, turned into a battle. Dr. Chin had always been a staunch supporter of Knox's methods and had been skeptical of Emily's ideas from the start. "You're asking us to change everything we know, Emily," Dr. Chin said, her voice sharp, cutting through the tension in the room. "You're still a child. You don't understand the complexities of the work we do. I've been in this field for over 20 years. I've seen what happens when we deviate from the protocols." Emily clenched her fists, keeping her cool. She had to make them see reason, or everything she had fought for would fall apart. "I understand more than you think," she said, her voice steady. "I've seen what happens when we don't deviate from the protocols. We lose children like Sarah." For a moment, there was silence. Dr. Chin's eyes flickered. She knew Emily was right, but she wasn't about to admit it. Not yet. Despite the resistance, Emily's ideas began to take root. Slowly but surely, more staff members, young therapists, social workers, even some skeptical doctors, began to see the potential in her approach. A breakthrough came during a meeting with the hospital's pediatric team, when Emily proposed a pilot program for integrated therapy, a mix of traditional methods with alternative approaches like art, music, and movement therapy. The program would start small, with a select group of patients, including Sarah. Emily worked alongside the therapists to develop a tailored approach, spending hours with Sarah outside of her regular sessions, building rapport, and integrating things like painting, singing, and even playing instruments. It was a gamble. No one could predict the outcome. But Emily had seen Sarah's transformation with her own eyes, and she was determined to push forward. The pilot program kicked off with a lot of fanfare. Emily was in charge of it, and though she was only 11, she had earned the respect of most of the hospital staff. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of planning, trial, and error. But Sarah, along with the other children in the program, began to show signs of improvement. Sarah, who had once been so terrified of socializing, began to engage more with the therapists. She played the piano timidly at first, but by the end of the month, she was playing full songs, her body relaxed, her smile brighter. Emily watched her progress, her heart swelling with pride. She knew this was only the beginning. But Emily couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Not everything was going smoothly. Some of the children weren't responding as well as others. The doubt started creeping in again. What if it was all a fluke? What if this wasn't enough? Just as things seemed to be progressing, a setback hit. One of the children in the program, Max, a 7-year-old boy who had been struggling with deep trauma, showed no signs of improvement. In fact, he regressed. His behavior became more erratic, and he lashed out during every session. Emily tried everything she could think of. She worked closely with Max's therapist, brainstorming new ways to engage him, but nothing worked. The hospital board grew concerned. Dr. Chin was quick to point out the failure, and she used it as ammunition to criticize the pilot program. "See," she said during a board meeting. "We've strayed too far from the standard methods. It's causing more harm than good." Emily's heart sank. It wasn't just about Max. It was about the future of the program, her career, and everything she'd worked for. But she refused to back down. Emily didn't have the answer right away. She spent sleepless nights reviewing Max's case, his history, and the methods that had worked with the other children. Then, one evening, she had a breakthrough. Max wasn't responding because he needed something the others didn't: consistency. Max's trauma had left him with an overwhelming need for a structured environment. He needed stability. Emily's approach had been right for the other children: art, music, and self-expression, but Max needed something else. Emily adjusted the program, adding in a stricter routine for Max. She worked with his therapist to integrate more structure, using the same methods but giving Max a clearer path to follow. It wasn't easy. But within weeks, the boy's behavior started to change. Slowly but surely, he began to open up. As the months went by, the pilot program grew into something much bigger. The hospital board, which had once been skeptical, started to see the results. Emily's integrated therapy program was changing the lives of children who had once been written off by traditional methods. Max's transformation was the final piece of the puzzle. He began to trust again, and his progress became a shining example of what Emily's methods could do. Dr. Chin, who had been one of her biggest critics, finally spoke up in support of the program. "I was wrong," she admitted in a meeting. "You've proven that these methods can work. The children, our children, deserve this." Emily's success was recognized by the hospital and beyond. The child behavioral revolution had begun, and the ripple effect would be felt across the entire field of child psychology. As for Emily, she wasn't just Clara Green's daughter anymore. She was a pioneer in her own right. She had proven that change was possible, even when the odds were stacked against you. But Emily knew the journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. The hospital had become a different place. The winds of change were blowing, and they were stronger than anyone had anticipated. The child behavioral revolution wasn't just an idea anymore, it was becoming a standard. Emily's program was slowly gaining traction. Still, not everyone was on board. It was the first full month since Dr. Knox's departure, and Emily found herself facing new challenges. Despite the success of her integrated therapy program, there was resistance from some of the senior doctors. Dr. Rebecca Chin, the neurologist who had initially opposed Emily, became more vocal. She started questioning the data, looking for cracks in the evidence Emily had carefully collected. "You can't expect us to rely on anecdotal evidence alone, Emily," Dr. Chin said one afternoon, her voice sharp. "You're still in the early stages. There's no long-term data to back up your claims." Emily could feel the sting of the criticism, but she was ready. "I'm not asking anyone to blindly trust me," she replied, meeting Dr. Chin's gaze. "I'm asking you to trust the children, trust the results we're seeing. Trust that there's more than one way to heal." The conversation didn't end with Dr. Chin's approval, but Emily had a plan. She was going to gather more than just anecdotal evidence. She needed proof, something irrefutable. As Emily's program gained more attention, the pressure on her grew. The hospital board, eager to see the success continue, demanded a formal study to measure the effectiveness of her methods. It was the next step, an undeniable marker of progress. Emily knew the study was crucial, but she was also aware of the stakes. The study could either solidify her work or expose flaws in her approach. With the eyes of the entire medical community on her, Emily was determined not to fail. She reached out to a few experts in the field who had expressed interest in her methods. Dr. Mary Lee, a pediatric psychologist from a neighboring hospital, agreed to partner with her on the study. Together, they designed a longitudinal research project that would track children's progress under the new therapy program for a full year. They would measure psychological, social, and emotional changes, comparing Emily's methods to traditional approaches. The study wasn't just a chance to prove the program's worth, it was a personal test for Emily. She was no longer a child hoping to make a difference. She was now the face of a movement, and this study was her opportunity to show that her approach was not only viable but also essential. Weeks into the study, Emily began to notice something extraordinary. The children enrolled in the pilot program were responding. Not just small improvements, but significant changes. Max, who had once been the most resistant, was now actively participating in group therapy. Sarah, the quiet, withdrawn girl, began to speak more often, offering her opinions and even taking leadership in some of the group activities. The results weren't just numbers on paper, they were real, tangible progress. Emily began to see her work validated in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her methods were not only working, they were transforming these children. But Emily couldn't rest on her laurels. The pressure of the study weighed heavily on her, especially when Dr. Chin's skepticism didn't seem to waver. There was still a sense of doubt in the air, and Emily knew that until the study concluded with undeniable success, she was still walking a tightrope. It was during one of the final phases of the study when Emily was faced with an unexpected twist. A series of new patients had been added to the program. These were children with far more severe conditions than the initial group, children who had been abandoned by the system and left to fall through the cracks. One of the new patients, a 10-year-old boy named Jason, had been diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. He had witnessed his parents' violent deaths in a car accident and had not spoken a word since the incident. His behavior was erratic and violent at times, and his caregivers had warned Emily that his case was one of the most difficult they had seen in years. Emily knew that Jason's case could make or break her program. She worked tirelessly with him, integrating more one-on-one sessions, trying to build trust, but progress was slow. Every day was a battle, against his trauma, his resistance, and his fears. But it was during one of these moments that Emily found herself at a crossroads. Jason, though withdrawn and violent at times, began to hum a familiar tune, a song he had heard in his therapy session. Emily couldn't believe her ears. The music had broken through. Jason wasn't talking, but he was connecting. That was all Emily needed to see. But as Jason's breakthroughs continued, Emily was pulled into an emergency meeting with the hospital board. The tension had grown unbearable, and the outcome of the study was still up in the air. Emily's methods were under intense scrutiny, and the board members were divided. Some were in support of her approach, while others, like Dr. Chin, remained staunchly opposed. "It's too risky," Dr. Chin argued during the meeting. "There's no way we can continue this experiment without more extensive evidence." Emily's heart raced. It was a critical moment. She couldn't let the fear of failure stop her now. She had already seen the lives of these children change in ways she couldn't have imagined, and she wasn't about to let that go. "If you're waiting for more evidence, you'll be waiting forever," Emily said, her voice strong. "But if you're ready to act on what we already know, if you're ready to change lives now, then this is the moment we make a choice. We either keep pretending that the old methods work, or we do something that matters." The room went silent. Emily could feel the eyes of the board on her. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. It was late that night when Emily received the news. The board had voted. The decision was unanimous. The child behavioral revolution was officially adopted as the hospital's standard treatment for children struggling with mental health issues. The integrated therapy program, combining art, music, and traditional therapy, would be rolled out across the hospital and implemented in other locations. Dr. Chin, though reluctant, had come around after seeing the undeniable progress in the study's results. She, too, acknowledged that the old methods weren't enough anymore. Emily had proven that. In a quiet moment, as Emily walked through the hospital corridors, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The hospital that had once rejected her, that had ignored her vision, was now embracing it. The work was far from over, but Emily had taken the first step toward a future that would change countless lives. And for Emily, that was all that mattered. As Emily's program began to expand, the hospital felt like it was bursting at the seams. Children who had been waiting for months were now getting the care they deserved, but with the influx of new patients came a host of new challenges. The staff was overwhelmed, and the pressure to continue delivering results was mounting. Emily felt it too. Despite the early successes of the pilot program, there were moments when she doubted herself. Could she really maintain this level of success? Could she keep helping children like Sarah and Jason when the stakes grew higher and higher? One afternoon, Emily stood in front of a group of new therapists, trying to inspire them. They had been trained in traditional methods, and many were skeptical of the new approach. Some of them had heard about her success but weren't sure what to make of a young girl calling the shots. "We're not just treating the symptoms," Emily said, trying to calm her nerves. "We're connecting with these kids. We're showing them they're more than their diagnosis. We're giving them a chance to be seen, heard, and healed." She saw their skepticism in their eyes, heard the quiet whispers of doubt. It would take time to win them over. She knew that. But Emily was determined to prove that her methods could work. While Emily continued to push forward, there were cracks starting to show. Jason, who had been showing progress, had a setback. The structured routine she had put in place for him began to feel too rigid. He regressed into violent outbursts, and for the first time, Emily wasn't sure how to fix it. Despite his early improvement, Jason began shutting down again, and Emily found herself at a loss. She tried everything she could think of, different forms of art, music, and even movement therapy, but nothing seemed to reach him. The breakthrough she had hoped for didn't happen. It was then that she realized something important: Jason's trauma was more deeply rooted than she had anticipated. It wasn't enough to just offer creative therapy. He needed trust, stability, and perhaps most of all, time. Emily found herself reflecting on her mother's teachings: patience and understanding, not just solutions. The kids in her program weren't problems to be solved, they were people who needed space to heal at their own pace. She had to adjust her approach. Instead of focusing on results, she decided to take a step back and allow the children to set the pace of their own healing. Meanwhile, a surprising development took place. Dr. Rebecca Chin, who had once been Emily's most vocal opponent, began to see the value in the program. At first, she had been an obstacle, criticizing the new methods, questioning Emily's qualifications, and suggesting that the program would fail. But, as time went on, Dr. Chin began to notice something undeniable: the children were improving. Max, who had been one of the most challenging cases, started showing signs of emotional growth. He had even made his first real friend in the therapy group, a 6-year-old girl named Mia who had been diagnosed with social anxiety. The two were inseparable during group sessions, and for the first time, Max had shown a willingness to work with others. Dr. Chin couldn't ignore the progress any longer. One afternoon, she came to Emily with a proposition. "You've proven that your methods work, Emily," Dr. Chin said. "I was wrong to dismiss you. I've seen the results with my own eyes." Emily blinked in surprise, her heart pounding. Dr. Chin wasn't just offering her an apology, she was offering support. "I want to help you refine this program," Dr. Chin continued. "But we'll need more resources, more data, and more backing from the hospital board." This was the breakthrough Emily had been waiting for. With Dr. Chin's support, she would have the credibility she needed to solidify her program. But Emily knew it wouldn't be easy. This wouldn't be the end of the battle. It was just the beginning of something even bigger. As the program gained momentum, Emily's life began to feel like a balancing act. She was the face of the revolution, but she was also still just a child, trying to navigate a world that often seemed too big, too complicated. One evening, as Emily walked home from the hospital, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother, Clara Green. "How's everything going, Em? I've been hearing great things. Just remember to take care of yourself too. You're doing incredible work, but don't forget to breathe." Emily smiled, reading her mother's words. She had always admired Clara's ability to balance work and family, even when things got tough. Emily had big shoes to fill, and sometimes it felt like she wasn't quite there yet. That night, Emily took her mother's advice. She spent the evening alone, sitting in her room, away from the chaos of the hospital. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to think about something other than therapy, reports, and hospital politics. She thought about the world beyond St. Michael's. She thought about her friends, her neighborhood, and the life she had once known. The realization hit her hard: she couldn't do this alone. She had to rely on the people who believed in her. Her mother. Dr. Chin. The nurses who had quietly supported her. The children who trusted her. But the question still loomed large: what would she do when the battle was won? Would she be able to step back and let others carry the torch, or would she always feel the need to push forward, to change the world? Just as things seemed to be going smoothly, disaster struck. One of the hospital's biggest donors, a wealthy businessman named Thomas Foster, threatened to pull his financial support from the hospital unless the child behavioral revolution was shut down. Foster was a longtime supporter of traditional medicine and had used his influence to secure funding for various projects, but he didn't believe in Emily's program. He thought it was a waste of resources, and worse, he thought Emily was unqualified to run a program of this magnitude. This sent shockwaves through the hospital. Emily had never dealt with anything like this before. The pressure mounted as the hospital board was forced to make a decision: did they back Emily's program and risk losing Foster's support, or did they compromise their vision for the future of child psychology to appease a donor? Emily found herself at a crossroads. She couldn't let her work be dismantled by money and influence, but she didn't have the power to stand against a man who could make or break the hospital's financial future. The fight was far from over. With time running out, Emily knew there was only one way forward. She would confront Foster directly, armed with the results of her program and the support of the hospital staff. It was the ultimate test. If she lost this battle, it could be the end of everything she had worked for. The night before the meeting, Emily sat at her desk, staring at the documents spread out in front of her. It was her final pitch, her last chance to save the revolution. She took a deep breath, then reached for her phone. She called Dr. Chin. "We're going to do this together," Emily said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "I need you." Dr. Chin's response was immediate. "I'm with you. Let's do this." The meeting with Thomas Foster was set. Emily felt the weight of it settle over her, but she couldn't afford to show any sign of weakness. The stakes were higher than ever. Not just for her program, but for the future of countless children who would benefit from the changes she was fighting for. She had to stay calm, stay focused. Dr. Chin had come to her side, and together, they prepared their argument. They didn't just have the results from the pilot program, they had the testimonials of therapists, parents, and even children whose lives had changed dramatically. Every piece of evidence they gathered spoke to the undeniable success of the new approach. The conference room was stark, cold, perfectly suited for a battle. Emily and Dr. Chin walked in together, side by side, taking their seats at the table. Across from them sat Foster, flanked by his lawyers and a few key hospital board members. Emily stood up first, her voice steady and clear. "Mr. Foster," she began, "I know you have concerns about the direction this hospital is going. But I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to show you what we've accomplished. What we can accomplish, if you give us the support we need." Foster raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "You're wasting my time, Emily. I've seen the numbers. What's your point?" She nodded, taking a deep breath, then opened the binder in front of her. "The point is, Mr. Foster, that we are changing lives. The children in this program are thriving. And I know, deep down, that you didn't invest in this hospital to watch it fail. We have a responsibility to these kids, to help them grow, to help them heal. I'm asking you to give them that chance." Dr. Chin spoke up next, her voice calm but unwavering. "We're not asking for charity. We're asking for belief. These methods have worked, overwhelmingly so. And I know, given your background, that you don't make decisions lightly. But I'm asking you to see the truth in front of you, not just the numbers." The silence in the room stretched for what felt like an eternity. Emily could see the conflict in Foster's eyes. He was torn between the power of his financial influence and the reality of the results in front of him. Finally, Foster leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "You've got one shot at this, Emily," he said. "I'm willing to support this, if you can prove it works across the board. Not just in a small group, but with every child that walks through those doors. You've got a year. Prove to me this isn't a fluke." It wasn't the win Emily had hoped for, but it was progress. A year, she had a year to solidify her place and prove the effectiveness of her methods on a larger scale. She nodded. "You won't regret it." With Foster's conditional support, Emily knew she had to hit the ground running. The hospital's board had agreed to fund an expanded program, but they were now under intense scrutiny. Emily needed more data, more evidence to justify the continued investment. The pressure was suffocating, but she couldn't stop. Not now. She spent the next few months working tirelessly with Dr. Chin and the other therapists. They expanded the program to include a wider variety of children, those with more severe conditions. This time, Emily wasn't just focusing on the children she had worked with before, she was including children from different socioeconomic backgrounds, those with various forms of trauma, and those who had been abandoned by traditional methods. The results were even more astonishing than before. Children who had been deemed incurable or unresponsive began showing improvement. Their speech improved, their social interactions became more fluid, and their emotional well-being was slowly but surely on the rise. Emily's program wasn't just changing lives, it was saving them. However, as the program's success continued to unfold, the pressure from the hospital board increased. They wanted numbers. They wanted results. It was clear that, while Emily had made a difference, the financial aspect still loomed large in the background. Every breakthrough was met with another request for more data. Emily knew she needed to prove this was sustainable, but her time was running out. Despite the growing success, Emily began to feel the cracks forming. Long hours, endless meetings, and the constant weight of expectations were beginning to take their toll. She was only 12 years old, after all. No matter how much she had accomplished, she was still a child, and that reality hit harder each day. One evening, after another grueling day at the hospital, Emily found herself alone in her room, staring at the pile of paperwork and research in front of her. Her phone buzzed with another notification, a meeting tomorrow with the board. The weight of it all felt suffocating. She needed to step away for a moment, but she couldn't. Suddenly, a text message appeared on her phone. It was from her mother. "I'm proud of you, Em. But remember, you're not alone in this. Take care of yourself. You don't have to carry everything on your own." Emily stared at the words for a moment, a wave of relief washing over her. Clara had always known exactly what Emily needed to hear. Emily realized then that she had been carrying the weight of this revolution alone for too long. She needed to lean on the people who had supported her from the start. Her mother. Dr. Chin. The nurses who had believed in her vision. She wasn't just changing the system for herself. She was doing it for the children, for the future. And in that moment, she understood that she didn't have to carry it all by herself. With renewed strength, Emily reapproached the board meeting with determination. This time, she wasn't just presenting data. She was presenting a vision, a future where children were treated with the empathy and understanding they deserved. "I've spent months working alongside my colleagues, gathering the data you asked for," Emily began. "But I've also spent these months watching kids grow, watching them open up in ways that were once thought impossible. I've seen them heal, not just with therapy, but with understanding, care, and creativity." She paused, making eye contact with each of the board members. They were all listening now, as the room had become a place of quiet focus. "I'm not asking you to believe in a theory. I'm asking you to believe in the future, one where children aren't seen as a set of symptoms, but as people who deserve a chance to thrive." The board sat in silence for a long moment. Emily could feel the tension in the air, but she didn't break her gaze. This was her moment. Finally, the head of the board spoke. "We're in. The hospital will fully fund the child behavioral revolution. You've proven your point, Emily. Let's make sure we make this permanent." With the full backing of the board, Emily's program was no longer a pilot project. It became the hospital's official approach to child psychology. The revolution she had started had become a movement, one that would ripple out far beyond St. Michael's walls. But Emily knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge would be making this approach the standard in hospitals across the country. She had proven that her methods worked. Now, she had to show the world. As she stood in front of a packed auditorium at a national conference, Emily spoke once more. "We've only just started," she said, her voice clear and confident. "This isn't just about changing the way we treat children. It's about changing the way we see them. We need to be better, and together, we will be." The crowd erupted in applause. Emily smiled. It wasn't the end of her journey, it was the beginning of something much, much bigger.